Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on my channel Search Research. I'm Dr. Sam and I'm here to today explain to you why contextualizing your research findings is very important and absolute key to presenting your research studies. So remember, obtaining answers to your research questions may be comparatively easy, but the difficult part is examining how your findings fit into the existing body of knowledge. How do answers to your research questions compare with what others have found? What contributions have you been able to make to the existing body of knowledge, and how are your findings different from those of others? Now, undertaking a literature review will enable you to compare your findings with those of others and answering these questions, but it is important to place your findings in the context of what is already known in your field of inquiry. That is, to integrate what you have found out with the existing literature. In today's video, I will take up few different examples and explain to you how you may contextualize your research. So remember, contextualization is designed into our research through the choice of the research setting by providing a rich description of the setting of the study, including its geographical location and other contextual factors which are relevant to the issues under investigation. For instance, if the aim of your research is to investigate a middle school student's use, attitude, and perceptions of collaborative writing in a Chinese, let's say where English is the first language setting, a proper contextualization of this setting will involve a detailed description of the Chinese EFL or English as first language setting in general. Now, Chinese schooling system, middle schoolers in China, the textbooks and the syllabus used in the school, methodology used by teachers, type of teachers employed, and their gender, the geographical location of the school, whether it's urban or rural, and any other relevant factor will be involved in the contextualization of your research findings. Contextualization is made by providing a rich description of our research participants, and that is one way of doing it, as well as providing a rich description of the research assistants, including their number, age, gender, educational background. For instance, if I use the same example that I just now used, a Chinese student's use of collaborative writing in their classes, a good contextualization of these research participants involve a detailed description of a host of aspects and factors relevant to these research participants, which includes their age, gender, whether they are a homogeneous or a heterogeneous group, their socio-cultural and educational backgrounds, their numbers in the classroom, their attitude towards English in general and English language teaching in particular, and their attitude towards their teacher and their school. Contextualization is further made by providing a rich description of how data was collected, namely the tools you employed in collecting or gathering the data, and the procedures or the methods followed in collecting the data. For example, if the purpose of the research was to investigate the role of high school teachers' preparedness, views, and attitudes towards utilizing and implementing a task-based language teaching in an English as first language setting in the Gulf region, the investigator is likely to use observation, teacher lesson plans, interviews and surveys, class course books as tools to collect data. As for the data collection procedures, the investigator might consider making daily logs, daily journals and diaries, then using the teacher's notes, creating specific observation rubrics to gauge the teacher's level of expertise, their views and attitudes, using retrospective and introspective interviews with the teachers, and closely observing how these teachers are actually implementing the recommended methodology. Contextualization can also be made by providing a rich description of your research participants and research assistants. I have already mentioned that. Right? Now, research is a product of its time. With the passage of time, the meaning of various constructs, their values, and the factors giving rise to them can change. For example, as such, research must be contextualized by taking into account any historical factors, a year and semester or term data collected, investigating a new trend, methodology introduced, or a new established methodology when describing the research settings, including the timings of data gathering. Now, configuration is defined as a set of factors when considered together can sometimes yield a more interpretable and theoretically interesting pattern than any of the factors would show in isolation. As such, investigators should try to configure as many variables in their research as they possibly can for more robust and theoretical research findings. Now, all studies may omit variables because it is virtually impossible to control every single variable that can or might affect our research. However, you must be aware of the potential effect of range restriction, that is the unwarranted limiting of the variables of our research on the results of our study. Because if the neglected variables are causally significant, their omission creates problems in interpreting the results. By the same token, omitting important variables might lead to having inconsistent findings across studies when drawing comparisons with other research. That is why it's very important that when you are listing the variables, when you are thinking of the variables, involve the research team, involve your supervisors, involve your other students, think about, talk to other academics as well, because sometimes they might come up with some variables that you have not thought of, especially the control variables. So the example here I've shown you is that maybe you are studying the effect of sunlight versus artificial light on plant height, and you have thought of water, soil, temperature, day night time, but there could be some other factor that you have not thought of, maybe the shape of the pot, something that you may not think is important but somebody else might question you on it. So that time, think about these variables and make sure that you include them in your study, or you contextualize your research into these variables as well. So another way of contextualizing research is, of course, uh, um, when your research is interdisciplinary or comparing it to other kinds of research or other research in this area, you need to connect to the other disciplines and domains of study. For example, if the goal of your research was to do an ethnography of speaking study, you will need to review the related literature in the disciplines and subdisciplines of, let's say, discourse analysis, anthropology, linguistics, and language using in cultures, subcultures, and social groups. Finally, when your research project is carried out in more than one location or setting, you need to link it to these other locations and settings, including the participants, the data collection tools and procedures, timing of the research, in all related settings. Now, this applies to research that is carried out, for instance, in an English as first language setting, and an English as a second language setting in a larger public university and a small private university in 2 or 3 different cities or different countries. So how you contextualize research with respect to where your research was set, where your research collected data in comparison to other disciplines, comparing to prior research, comparing to historical data, comparing it to variables that were introduced, comparing it to the participants who participated, your data collection methods, all that is a contextualization of research. So because if you are wondering why contextualizing is important, it is important because when you are presenting your research findings, it is important for you to be aware of the fact that the findings of your research are relevant to your particular research context. Of course, we expect our research findings to be generalizable to other contexts as well. That can only be generalized if you are aware of the factors that constrain the generalization. So the findings of your research may be generalized to other contexts, provided you have spoken about or you have talked about how the research participants, data collection methods, settings, research settings, historical data, country in which you have set the experiment, or comparing it to other disciplines, make it slightly different. So that way you clearly highlight the constraints of your research as well as highlight the strengths of your research and how it can be used by other researchers for their own study, keeping in mind what was the context in which you collected or carried out your research. I hope this video was useful for your studies, and please like, comment, share, subscribe, and see you soon with my next video. Bye for now.